Ever get that feeling like you're just scratching the surface? Like there's this whole other level of understanding out there, but sifting through all the noise to find it.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be overwhelming trying to separate fact from fiction, especially with so much information these days.
Well, that's kind of what we're tackling today, right? These conspiracy theories you sent over, stuff from the Joe Rogan experience, and those lists of theories that were either proven true or still kind of out there.
Right. And the goal here isn't really to debunk or endorse any of these. It's more about exploring them, picking out those details that make you go, wait, hold on a sec. And a heads up, we're going to be wading into some politically sensitive territory, but we're staying objective here, just laying out the information.
Exactly. No soapboxes here. So buckle up, folks, because we're diving deep into lost civilizations, potential government secrets, even alternate realities. Who knows? Maybe we'll uncover some of those aha moments along the way.
Sounds like a plan. Let's start with those hidden histories you mentioned.
Right.
The ones Joe Rogan's been talking about, evidence of advanced civilizations in the Amazon.
Right. Rogan was talking about how early European explorers, like back in the 1500s, wrote about running into these massive, sophisticated civilizations in the Amazon. Cities, roads, the works. But then, a couple hundred years later, poof, gone. Later explorers couldn't find a trace.
It's fascinating how modern tech is now backing up some of those old accounts. Rogan mentioned LiDAR, that laser technology that can map terrain even through dense jungle.
And LiDAR is showing us incredible things like extensive road networks, irrigation systems that could supported huge populations. It's like they were swallowed by the jungle, millions of people just gone.
And the timeline's pretty telling. Those civilizations seem to have vanished within a century or so after the Europeans showed up, likely because of diseases like smallpox, wiping out entire populations before they could even be properly documented. And then the jungle just grew over everything.
Makes you wonder what else is out there, hidden under our noses. I mean, entire civilizations vanishing like that. It's almost like, what if we found Atlantis?
Speaking of Atlantis, that's another one you sent over. Specifically, that theory by Jimmy Corsetti that Joe Rogan discussed, linking the Riccia structure in Mauritania to Plato's descriptions of Atlantis.
Right. That huge, almost perfectly circular thing in the Sahara Desert. It's pretty mind-blowing when you see it from space. Corsetti points out all these crazy similarities to how Plato described Atlantis.
There are a ton of similarities, actually. For one, that series of rings with a diameter ratio of about 3:2, which is what Plato said. Then there are these features that look like remnants of islands separated by moats and that unmistakable bullseye pattern.
It goes even deeper. Plato mentions mountains to the north of Atlantis, and guess what? The Atlas Mountains are north of the Richat structure. And get this, the first king of Atlantis was Atlas, right? Well, the first known king of Mauritania was also named Atlas. Coincidence?
Maybe, maybe not. But the geology matches up too. Plato describes red, black, and white stone, all of which are found in Mauritania. And then there's the wealth of Atlantis, all that gold. Mauritania has significant gold deposits. And, historically, that's where figures like Mansa Musa, the ruler of the Mali Empire, got their riches.
So we've got the shape, the mountains, the gold. Okay, but what about Atlantis sinking? Plato says it went down after some cataclysm, leaving behind mud and shallow water, making it impossible to sail there.
And here's the thing. The Sahara Desert wasn't always a desert. Up until about 4,500, 5,000 years ago, it was way greener. If there was a massive flood followed by a drying period, well, you'd end up with exactly those conditions.
And the timeline. Plato says Atlantis was destroyed about 9,000 years before his time. Corsetti links that to the end of the Younger Dryas, which was a period of crazy climate change about 11,600 years ago. Even Rogan was like, whoa, this is kind of lining up.
It does make you think, if entire civilizations could be lost and forgotten like that, how much else is out there that we just don't know about?
And speaking of things we might not know about, let's talk about those old maps of Antarctica. This blew my mind when I saw it, maps from like the 1500s. Showing Antarctica as a continent. I'm talking details like rivers, all this, hundreds of years before it was supposedly discovered in 1820.
What if these cartographers had access to even older maps? Maps from like ancient civilizations. This is a wild thought, but it could explain some of the details that we wouldn't have understood back then.
Like they had these pieces of ancient knowledge they were trying to fit into their understanding of the world. I don't know, it's fascinating. Makes you wonder what else is tucked away in some forgotten library somewhere.
Maybe, maybe not. Speaking of things being tucked away, let's jump to government secrets. One of the weirder ones from your sources was that whole thing about human bones being found in Benjamin Franklin's London house.
Oh, yeah. Over 1,200 bone fragments, something like 15 people. Turns out, the likely explanation is that Franklin's protege, William Houston, was running an anatomy school there.
Which, while a little creepy, makes more sense than some nefarious scheme. But the sources also mentioned Franklin being a Freemason, and that there's this theory that maybe the bones were tied to some secret Masonic rituals.
Well, even if it's not a conspiracy, it's still a pretty bizarre story. But you also sent over some confirmed cases of government deception. Operation Mockingbird, for example. The CIA using the media for propaganda. That's not even a theory anymore, that's history.
Right, it came out in the 70s. The CIA was basically planting stories, even funding journalists and publications to influence public opinion. Pretty wild stuff.
And it wasn't just the media. They admitted to giving tons of money to the Dalai Lama back in the 60s to support the Tibetan resistance against China.
The Dalai Lama's people even confirmed it. It was all part of the CIA's Cold War shenanigans.
Then there's the Tuskegee syphilis study. Hundreds of African-American men deliberately left untreated for syphilis, even when penicillin became available. An absolutely horrific abuse of power.
One of the darkest chapters in medical history, no question. Ran for 40 years. Absolutely appalling.
And Operation Paperclip. You know, the U.S. bringing over Nazi scientists after World War II. Sounds crazy, but it's totally true.
Yep, over 1,600 of them. Werner von Braun, the rocket scientist, he was one of them. They wanted that German expertise for the space race and other projects.
Speaking of shady programs, what about MKUltra? The CIA's mind control experiments, LSD, other drugs, all this crazy stuff. They were really messing with people's minds, and not in a good way.
Yeah, MKUltra was pretty messed up. So many ethical lines crossed. And we probably don't even know the half of it because they destroyed a bunch of the records.
Don't forget the Gulf of Tonkin incident. That whole thing about North Vietnamese boats attacking U.S. ships, which basically escalated the Vietnam War. Turns out it was exaggerated, maybe even completely made up.
The Pentagon Papers showed us that, right?
Yeah.
How they twisted the narrative to justify more military action.
Then you've got the Iran-Contra affair. Selling weapons to Iran in exchange for hostages, then using the money to fund the Contras in Nicaragua. It's like a political thriller gone wrong.
Reagan administration got caught with their hand in the cookie jar on that one. Talk about violating congressional restrictions.
Oh, and Operation Northwoods. This one is just nuts. The military literally proposed staging fake terrorist attacks in the U.S. and blaming Cuba to justify a war.
Thankfully, Kennedy shut that down. Hard to believe someone even thought that was a good idea.
The FBI spying on political groups, even John Lennon, COINTELPRO. That whole program shows how far they were willing to go to silence dissent.
Yeah, COINTELPRO was all about disrupting and discrediting groups they considered subversive. Really dark stuff.
You think that's bad? How about the government poisoning alcohol during Prohibition? Like intentionally adding toxic chemicals to bootleg liquor to try and scare people off drinking. Thousands died.
Desperate times, desperate measures, I guess. But that's seriously messed up.
Then there's the whole thing about the government possibly having technology to beam messages into people's heads using microwaves.
Microwave hearing. Yeah, there was a declassified Pentagon report in 2006 about that. Whether it's actually in use is another story.
The CIA heart attack gun, a tiny poison dart, untraceable, like something out of a spy movie.
That was declassified back in the 70s. Crazy what they come up with.
Weather control, Project Popeye in Vietnam, HARP, all that. The idea that they can manipulate weather patterns is kind of scary, if you think about it.
Well, they did try cloud seeding in Vietnam to make the monsoon season last longer. And HARP. It's controversial, for sure.
And of course, we can't forget about big tobacco hiding the fact that smoking causes cancer. Deception on a massive scale.
Yep. Documents prove they knew about the dangers way back in the 50s, but kept it quiet. All about the profits.
Planned obsolescence. That's another one. Building stuff to break down so you have to buy more. It's like they're playing us.
Well, it's a business model, right? Keep those sales coming.
Remember when the CIA was giving fake vaccines in Pakistan, trying to get DNA samples to track down bin Laden?
That one really backfired. Seriously damaged trust in vaccination programs.
And those UFO investigations.
Mm-hmm.
Project Blue Book, the government taking UFOs seriously enough to actually study them, makes you wonder.
I mean, they investigated thousands of sightings, and some of them remained unexplained. You gotta wonder what they really know.
Okay, let's go a little further down the rabbit hole. The space is fake theory. This one's pretty out there, even for Joe Rogan. The idea that NASA's lying about everything, that there's a water barrier above the Earth.
It gets wild. Eddie Bravo even ties it into this idea of a one-world government needing a fake alien threat to control everyone. And then there's that whole thing about the Vatican's involvement and the Lucifer telescope.
Which isn't actually owned by the Vatican, by the way, but it's out there. Then there's the whole moon landing hoax thing, the flag waving, no stars in the photos, the weird shadows. Some people even say there's a stagehand visible in one of the pictures.
Lost telemetry data, too. And questions about how Michael Collins managed that spacewalk. And why do the astronauts look so light on their feet, almost like they're on a trampoline? Even Rogan's gone back and forth on this one.
The simulation theory. We're all just living in a computer program. Elon Musk's talked about it. Rogan, too. What if things like the disappearance of that Malaysian Airlines flight, MH370, were glitches in the Matrix?
I don't know about that, but it is a pretty trippy thought. Like, what's outside the simulation if it's even real?
And the pole shift theory. That the Earth's axis could suddenly shift like 90 degrees, causing huge tsunamis and basically wiping out civilization. Those sources mention saltwater and sea creatures found way up high, like on that Mikusi volcano in Africa.
Pretty intense.
Yeah.
And while scientists do say the Earth's poles shift, it's a super slow process, not some sudden catastrophic flip.
All right, let's run through a few more. What about the idea that Hitler didn't actually die in that bunker? Declassified documents, Hoover's investigations, alleged sightings in South America. It's a compelling idea.
It's definitely one of those historical mysteries that keeps people guessing. Did he really die there, or did he escape?
The multiple universe theory. You know, infinite realities. It's kind of like that Mandela effect where everyone has the same false memory, like the Berenstain Bears, or is it Berenstein?
Yeah, quantum superposition. The idea that particles can exist in multiple states at once.
Yeah.
Could that explain these weird shared memories? Like little glimpses into other realities?
Time travel. Terence McKenna said inventing a time machine would make time nonlinear. And then there's that block universe idea, where past, present, and future are all happening at the same time. Mind-bending stuff.
Yeah, it throws everything we think we know about time out the window.
The JFK assassination, multiple shooters, that magic bullet, the autopsy discrepancies. Rogan and Mick West went back and forth about it. There are just so many unanswered questions.
Definitely a lot of fuel for those conspiracy theories, and for good reason. The evidence is pretty weird.
Okay, this one's a little out there. There's a theory that Stanley Kubrick's The Shining is actually about faking the moon landing. Hidden messages, symbols. Some people even say the Illuminati had him killed.
Yeah, that one's a bit much. Reading way too much into things, if you ask me.
The White Helmets in Syria. Are they heroes, or are they a front for al-Qaeda, using crisis actors to stage events? It's hard to know what to believe when it comes to war zones.
The fog of war makes it hard to separate truth from propaganda, both sides pushing their own narratives.
The stoned ape theory. The idea that early humans eating magic mushrooms helped our brains evolve faster.
McKenna and Stamets were big proponents of that one. It's interesting, but not exactly proven.
What happens after we die? Some people say there's a chemical gateway in the brain. Robert Monroe did all that research on out-of-body experiences. It makes you wonder, with the universe being as vast as it is, do we really know anything about death?
That's a question for the ages, isn't it?
The Denver airport, the murals, the weird architecture, rumors of bunkers. Some say it's a hub for the New World Order, or even aliens.
That airport definitely has a weird vibe. All those Masonic symbols, the cryptic artwork. Big pharma.
Are they really suppressing cures for diseases to keep making money? It's cynical, but it's hard to ignore the profit motive in healthcare.
Well, it is a business.
Yeah.
But it's a tough one to swallow, that they would actually withhold cures.
The phantom time hypothesis. That 300 years of history were just made up. That would change everything.
Yeah, the idea that we've got the timeline wrong, crazy, right?
What if the Titanic that sank wasn't the Titanic? Like they swapped it with its sister ship, the Olympic, for an insurance scam. They did look pretty similar.
That's a popular one.
Free energy being suppressed by the powers that be, Tesla and all that. It makes sense in a way, but it's also kind of frustrating if it's true.
It's a nice thought. Unlimited clean energy.
The Federal Reserve, a private corporation controlling the economy. They're not even really part of the government, which is weird.
It's a strange system for sure.
The lab leak theory for COVID. Did it really come from a bat, or was it an accident in that Wuhan lab?
Yeah, that one's still up for debate.
MH370. That plane just vanished. What if it was hijacked? They changed course, turned off the transponder. Where did it go?
One of the biggest aviation mysteries ever.
The Vatican archives. Ancient texts, proof of aliens, who knows what else. It's like a treasure trove of secrets, locked away from the world.
A lot of people would love to get their hands on those archives.
The Australian bushfires. where they intentionally started to clear land for a high-speed rail line. Arson was a factor, but climate change was the main culprit, right?
Most definitely.
Elvis faking his death, the messed up death certificate, all the sightings over the years. Some people really believe he's still out there.
The king lives on, at least in their hearts.
The idea that the CIA created HIV, a horrifying thought, but not outside the realm of possibility when you look at some of their past actions.
That's a tough one to believe.
What if the FBI is behind some of those conspiracy theory threads on Reddit, like trying to control the narrative or something?
It's not as crazy as it sounds.
Yeah.
Governments are definitely active in the online world.
The Tasmanian tiger. Officially extinct, but there are still reports of sightings. Maybe it's not gone after all.
It would be amazing if it was still out there.
Princess Diana's death. Was it really just an accident, or was she murdered? A lot of people believe there was something more to it.
It's another tragedy shrouded in mystery.
And Jeffrey Epstein. Did he really kill himself, or was he silenced to protect powerful people?
The circumstances were definitely suspicious.
And finally, the Illuminati. Secret societies, celebrities, flashing symbols, controlling the world from the shadows. I mean, there was a real Illuminati back in the day, but this is a whole different animal.
Yeah, the modern version is more like a pop culture phenomenon.
Well, there you have it. We've covered a lot of ground here. Ancient civilizations, government conspiracies, alternative realities, and everything in between.
And remember, we're just presenting the information here, letting you draw your own conclusions.
It's amazing how many of these theories, even the really out there ones, tap into this deep human need to find answers, to make sense of things, especially when we feel like we haven't been told the whole truth.
Yeah, we want to understand the world around us, and sometimes the official narrative just doesn't cut it.
It makes you think, with all the information out there, how do you decide what to believe? What's your filter for separating fact from fiction, truth from lies?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And one we all have to answer for ourselves.
It's a journey, for sure. Keep those questions coming, folks. Keep digging, keep exploring. There's a whole universe of information out there.